Hello everybody, this is Gregory with 5-Minute Catholic Apologetics, where 5 minutes of your time may get you to the divine. Today we're going to talk about papal infallibility and what are some of the requirements for a promulgation from the Pope ex cathedra and how this connects to Protestant misunderstandings. Now before we begin, let's start with a prayer. Nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritui Sanctis. Amen. Gloria Patri et Filii et Spiritui Sancto, sicut erat in principio et nunc et semper et saecula saeculorum. So we do have a couple episodes about misconceptions about the Pope, just the Pope in general. I do have Protestants in my life who think that we need to listen to everything he says, and that's far from the case. That's far from the case. We can disagree with the Pope. Let's just say that straight out at the beginning. You can disagree with the Pope. It's totally fine to disagree with the Pope. Now, how you disagree with him is a question of charity. Because there's no charity in saying, I hate a pope, or I hate this pope, or this pope is evil. No, look, here's the thing. Popes are flawed men, just like we are. There's been good popes, and there's been horrifically bad popes. And when it comes to infallibility, which was dogmatically defined in Vatican Council I in 1870, there are certain criteria. And I think most Catholics know the criteria, at least the older ones, because they were maybe raised like the older ones in the Baltimore Catechism. But let's review a couple of things. So it has to be in faith and morals. So if a pope is like, I believe in flat earth, or I believe that Napoli is the best Italian Serie A soccer team, we can be like, it doesn't really matter. You can have your opinions. So it's just in faith and morals. Number 2. It can't contradict the ordinary magisterium. So the ordinary magisterium is essentially the deposit of faith that our patrimony has given us in the last 2,000 years. So for example, let's say the Four Marian dogma, or the belief in the Trinity, or the hypostatic union of Jesus. A pope can't come out and be like, the hypostatic union is wrong. He can't say anything that contradicts the deposit of faith. Number 3. He has to publicly say these things when he says something that invokes papal infallibility. So you've seen, like with Pope Francis, lots of times Pope Francis will be quoted by a reporter on the plane. Typically it's a lot of atheist reporters, and that he'll be quoted as saying something that's like a little shady, or you're like, what's going on? Doesn't matter. Look, a pope can have private opinions. A pope could be a subversive, a fifth column subversive who's trying to destroy the church. Doesn't matter. Look, ideally we don't want to have these guys, but what his private opinion is on something ultimately does not matter. If, for example, let's say he supports gay unions, homosexual unions, doesn't really matter. What he privately thinks, doesn't matter. We had a pope, I think it was like Benedict XIV. I did a video on him, how he did not believe privately in one of, or he was teaching publicly one of the Four Marian dogmas. But it was not a big deal because his successor clarified it and said that what the previous pope was saying was wrong. But my point is that's a little obfuscation, not probably the best example. But my point is, private opinions, even on faith and morals, ultimately don't matter. Lastly, he needs to say that he's promulgating this from ex cathedra, from the chair. And he says, I'm essentially invoking papal infallibility on this matter. And really, this has only happened 2 times where a pope has done this. We've had councils. Sure, Vatican I, Trent, of course, has tons. Council of Florence, we've had tons. Of course, the early ones, Nicaea, Constantinople I, Ephesus, we have videos on these things. But there's only been 2 occasions where a pope, in the modern times, and when I mean the modern times, really in the last 500 years, has said, ex cathedra, you need to believe this. And it was in 1854, Pius IX, who should be a saint, promulgated the Immaculate Conception, that Mary was conceived and born without sin. And 1950, where Pius XII, love the Piuses, from the chair of Peter, talked about the Assumption of Mary, the fourth Marian dogma. Now, these dogmas or these beliefs were believed since the early church. So sometimes popes will, or councils will, bring up something to clarify some confusion. Like look at Trent. Trent clarified a lot of stuff. One of them was giving the, again, official canon of the Bible, even though we had official canons going back to Council of Carthage and Hippo and Rome back in the early 5th century, late 4th century. So sometimes, like people would ask, oh, well, why didn't the Council of Nicaea, why didn't the Nicene Creed have the Eucharist mentioned in it? Well, it's like nobody denied the real presence at the time. The Council of Ephesus, Constantinople, those early ones were all about Christology. All about Christology. It wasn't about the Eucharist. So, like with the Immaculate Conception and with the Assumption, it was always believed. It's part of the deposit of faith. And for whatever reason, depending on which of those two examples, there was a reason why the Pope thought, let's foster and remind people about this Marian devotion. So, in closing, with papal infallibility, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It's only 2 times that a pope has done it. If you notice, the 2 times too, they were consistent with the deposit of faith, because both of those Marian dogmas were believed for quite some time. And he publicly stated those things, and of course they had to do with faith and morals. So I wouldn't worry about Pope Francis if one of those who worries about Pope Francis or his successor, because I'm sure he's going to pass away pretty soon, stating something that maybe the left or the modernist Catholics support, because it's not going to happen. He can't go against the deposit of faith, and even if he does, it's immediately invalid what he says. And like I said, it's so rare when it's been done. So you don't have to worry about it. So please understand papal infallibility, any Protestants who are listening. Okay, we don't think the popes are perfect. They are certainly peccable. They're not impeccable. They are very flawed. We've had some horrible popes like the Borgias, for example. It doesn't really matter. Ideally we want good popes, and we've had great popes, saintly popes. But ultimately, I think a lot of people, especially on the right, fixate too much on the quality of our popes. And I think the Romans have the best way to look at it. You have a fat pope, then you have a skinny pope. Then you have a fat pope, then you have a skinny pope. I think one way to look at it, it's almost like the presidents, but the presidents can actually do more damage than a pope, believe it or not. But some would disagree. And if you disagree, post in the comments. Guys, I'd love to hear from you. Post in the comments. Please subscribe and share with others. Until next time, take care. God bless and pray.